What if your mind was not built to protect you, but to betray you? What if every time you tried to defend yourself, you were secretly reinforcing the very chains that keep you small, reactive, vulnerable? Who truly wins when you explode in anger, when you justify your pain, when you fight back in a world designed to feed on your resistance? Perhaps the real power was never in domination, but in becoming untouchable, and not in the way they taught you. Not loud, not visible, but armored, from the inside out. They told you strength meant asserting yourself, speaking louder, standing taller. But Schopenhauer whispers something darker, something far more dangerous, that real power is not a performance. It's a silence so impenetrable it bends others without lifting a single word. It is the power of a mind no one can shake, not because it is rigid, but because it is empty of illusion. And in this emptiness, there is a force no opponent can locate, let alone destroy. That is what they fear, and that is what you're about to learn. Imagine walking through a world where insults evaporate before they reach you, where manipulation turns in on itself like a blade without a handle, where your stillness becomes a mirror in which others must confront their own chaos. This is not stoicism, nor apathy. It is something more ancient, more primal. It is the method of the armored mind. The strategy of becoming the one they cannot challenge, because every move they make reveals only their own weakness. You won't learn this from the modern noise. You won't find it in books of fake confidence or shouted affirmations. This is not about becoming more, it's about shedding what never belonged. Schopenhauer does not hand you weapons. He removes the need for them. He dismantles the false self that constantly seeks approval, vengeance, or victory. And when that self dies, what remains cannot be wounded. It cannot be provoked. It cannot be used. But the question is not whether this power exists. The real question, the one twisting inside you right now, is whether you are ready to see the world as it truly is, to see yourself without illusions. Because once you master this, there is no return. You will not unsee, and no one, not a single soul, will dare to challenge what they can no longer define. Stay with me. You're closer than you've ever been to becoming the one they will fear in silence. There is a silence within every insult, a shadow beneath every confrontation, a trembling behind every raised voice. What if the world that threatens you only does so because it senses your mind is still unarmored, still reachable, still soft in places you haven't yet explored? The moment you begin to think differently, not with rage, but with refined detachment, everything around you changes. Not because the world is fair, but because you've become unreadable. And what is unreadable cannot be manipulated. They told you strength is volume, that resilience is noise, but noise is easy to predict, and predictability is weakness disguised as power. The truly unshakable presence is not loud, it is impossibly calm. It does not argue, it does not justify, it does not bend, like stone that remembers fire, but now fears nothing. The armored mind is not born in a scream. It is forged in the crucible of silence and reflection, where the ego dies 1,000 deaths and still dares not speak. You've been taught to defend yourself with words, with explanations, with desperate attempts to make yourself understood. But clarity is not found in the explanations others demand from you. It's found in the fortress you build when you stop explaining. Schopenhauer whispered it beneath the layers of his despair. Those who suffer the least are not those who win, but those who withdraw without shrinking. The ones who walk away not to flee, but to become unapproachable. So what happens when your presence no longer offers a doorway to be entered, but a mirror to be feared? When your gaze holds not confrontation, but an ancient stillness that exposes the chaos in others. The world cannot challenge what it cannot provoke. And that precisely is the beginning of real control, not over others, but over the battlefield within. The mind that no longer reacts becomes invincible. But the path to such a mind is not paved with ease. It begins in the tension between who you pretend to be and who you truly are when no one is watching. It begins in the ache of your own contradictions. Have you noticed how often you smile when you want to scream? How often you nod when you long to disappear? The world feeds on your compliance, on your predictability. It studies your nervous laughter, your apologetic tone, your eyes that seek approval like a child abandoned in a crowd. And in that seeking, you surrender. You must ask yourself, who are you when the masks fall? When every gesture is stripped of performance and every sentence is reduced to silence? Most cannot bear that question because it demands the death of identity. But the armored mind is forged precisely in that fire. It emerges not by clinging to what is known, but by standing still in the unknown, letting the fear pass through, letting the need to be liked rot and fall away. You do not become untouchable by resisting the world, but by ceasing to need anything from it. People challenge you because they believe they can, because something in your posture, your tone, your breath grants them permission. You've handed over keys in the form of hesitation, opened doors with your desire to be understood. But the moment you realize that being misunderstood is not a curse, but a shield, the game changes. You become a question no one dares to answer, a presence no one can decode. And what cannot be decoded becomes a source of quiet terror to those who once assumed power over you. The armored mind is not cold. It is simply done bleeding for things that never deserved its softness. It speaks when speech is necessary and remains silent when the noise serves only ego. It no longer reacts because it has buried the parts that could be baited. And what remains is not emptiness, but stillness. A mind that is still enough to watch, to wait, to move only when the move is final, not to win an argument, but to end the war. But how do you arrive at that stillness when the world insists on shaking you? How do you remain unmoved when every voice around you demands your reaction, your agreement, your submission? The answer is not found in resisting noise with more noise. It is found in listening to what no one else hears, the faint pulse beneath the chaos, the whisper of your own truth, buried under layers of borrowed opinions. That whisper grows only in silence, and it is in that silence where the armored mind begins to breathe. What they fear is not your strength, it is your refusal to explain it. They cannot map what you do not reveal. They cannot manipulate what you do not seek. Most people wear their insecurities like emblems, desperate for someone to either affirm or destroy them. But when you no longer participate in that exchange, when you no longer crave their recognition nor fear their rejection, you become unreachable. You become the enigma they cannot engage without first questioning their own script. The power of the armored mind lies in this: it reflects, it does not absorb. Insults strike it and dissolve. Projections pass through it like shadows over stone. It does not mirror the emotion of others, but forces them to face themselves. And when people are forced to see themselves through the silence of someone who does not flinch, they either retreat or unravel. That is the violence of peace. It disarms without lifting a single hand. It exposes what chaos has tried to hide. To be untouchable is not to be feared, but to no longer be edible to the hunger of others. They cannot consume what you have reclaimed. They cannot feed on your need if it no longer exists, and so you walk among them, not above, not beneath, but beyond. And they feel it, though they cannot name it. You are no longer one of them because you are no longer for them. You belong to something deeper now, and in that depth you find a freedom so still it becomes a force. But freedom, in its purest form, is a kind of exile. It demands that you walk away not just from others, but from the versions of yourself that once depended on them. The armored mind is not adorned in steel. It is carved from solitude. It is the result of 1,000 silent battles fought in the dark corners of thought, where no applause is given and no witness remains. Every scar it holds is internal, invisible, but sharp enough to slice through illusion. And once you taste that solitude, the noise of the crowd becomes unbearable. Most people live not to understand, but to be understood. They speak only to hear their own echoes return with applause. But when you no longer seek validation, when your silence becomes more eloquent than their noise, you start to speak a different language, one that unsettles. You become a mirror without distortion, and what they see reflected terrifies them because it was never about you. It was always their own emptiness staring back. You will know you have entered this space when their weapons begin to fall without a fight. Not because they respect you, but because they can no longer reach you. The mechanisms they once used to wound you, guilt, shame, manipulation, now collapse in their hands like broken tools. They try to provoke, but their words fall into a void. Not because you resist them, but because you no longer carry the parts of yourself that could be hurt by them. You have become hollow to harm, not empty but full of something they cannot touch. This is not invincibility, it is invisibility to their tactics. You move through the world like a shadow with weight, seen but not grasped, present but not possessed. They feel you, but they cannot hold you. They try to define you, but their language fails. You are the silence after the storm, the calm that unnerves more than chaos ever could. And once you have reached this state, there is no going back, because what you left behind no longer has the power to summon you. Power, real power, is not something you hold in your hands. It's something others feel in your absence. The armored mind does not announce itself. It leaves an imprint, a space where others must confront their own insufficiency, not because you imposed it, but because your detachment revealed it. The one who no longer reacts becomes the one who rewrites the rules. Not through dominance, but through disinterest. And that disinterest, that stillness, becomes a force more disruptive than any rage. Those who once challenged you will start to hesitate, not because you've grown louder, but because you've grown quieter. You no longer enter battles where nothing sacred can be won. You no longer explain, defend, or justify. And that absence of effort becomes your most disarming presence. What terrifies them is not what you say, but what you no longer need to say. The walls they built to contain you now echo with their own irrelevance. And still, beneath all this, remains a paradox. You did not armor your mind to gain control. You did it to release yourself from the need for it. You did not detach to punish, but to remember. That before they could hurt you, they had to convince you that you were incomplete, that your worth needed confirmation, that your mind was a battlefield, and they were the prize. But now in this silent fortress you've built, you see the illusion for what it was, a performance you no longer attend. So the question no longer is, who dares to challenge you? The question becomes, why they would even try. When the storm no longer moves you, what power does thunder hold? When the noise of opinion fades like background static, what value do their judgments carry? You have not become untouchable. You have become unreachable. And in that space between what they try to provoke and what you refuse to feel, you are finally free. Perhaps in the end, it was never about shielding yourself from the world, but about remembering that the world was never meant to define you. What once felt like chaos outside was only the echo of your own unrest within. And now, as the dust settles and the noise loses its grip, you begin to notice something quieter, older, more sacred beneath it all. A truth that was always waiting, untouched, beneath the rubble of your defenses. The armored mind is not cold. It is not distant. It is simply untangled. It watches, it waits, it listens, and in its silence, it sees what others miss. The desperation behind the performance, the wounds behind the cruelty, the fear hiding inside the roar. It sees, and it does not flinch, not because it cannot feel, but because it no longer fears the feeling. Detachment is not absence. It is the art of remaining whole, even when the world forgets its own pieces. There is a moment, brief, weightless, when you realize you no longer seek to prove anything. That moment is a quiet revolution. You look into the eyes of those who once tried to reduce you, and all you feel is stillness. No rage, no need. Just the clarity of someone who no longer bleeds from invisible cuts. What they tried to own, you reclaimed. What they tried to distort, you remembered. And in that remembering, you became something no threat can touch, a soul in its own hands. So now ask yourself, what would life become if you no longer danced to the rhythm of their approval? What happens when the battleground becomes a garden? When every word that once triggered you dissolves like smoke in sunlight? That is not victory in the traditional sense. That is something older, purer, the return to your center. You are not untouchable because you built walls. You are untouchable because you tore them down and found nothing left to fear on the other side. If this message found you, if it stirred something ancient within you, then it is not coincidence. It is resonance. Stay with this feeling. Do not let it fade. Share it with those who might also be quietly fighting a war inside their minds. Leave your mark in the comments, let your voice join the echo, and subscribe, not for another video, but to walk beside others who are remembering their own silence, their own power, their own light.